The world needs more innovations for a sustainable future. Silicon Valley is a world-leading ecosystem of actors working together to identify opportunities and scale innovations in a global market. The close interaction with leading universities and the strong presence of venture capital contribute to creating a dynamic innovation system. Vinnova Silicon Valley's mission is to highlight Sweden as one of the most innovative regions in the world and link the Swedish innovation system and Silicon Valley. Together with the other Nordic countries, Vinnova has created the Nordic Innovation House, which connects tech companies and research institutions from the Nordics with the Silicon Valley ecosystem. Vinnova also offers fellowships in Silicon Valley in collaboration with Wallenberg Foundation. Vinnova. We need to innovate how we innovate.
Welcome to Vinnova Silicon Valley and Sweden Innovation Day, broadcasted in collaboration with Nordic Innovation House. Vinnova Silicon Valley edition focuses on sustainable themes by 7 sessions in 3 days. Check the program for all our sessions. These sessions will be recorded and you will find it on swedensiliconvalley.se in a short while. Again, welcome and enjoy.
Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session taking on climate tech. What can Sweden and Silicon Valley learn from each other? This is organized by the Swedish innovation agency Vinnova, which is a Swedish partner at the Nordic Innovation House in Silicon Valley. My name is Kirsti Cho. I'm a climate tech investor focusing on B2B companies here in the US and in Europe. So why should we talk about climate tech? During 2021, entrepreneurial activity and investments in climate tech have skyrocketed. In just 3 quarters, the amount of venture capital going into climate tech had exceeded the whole of 2020, landing at over 40 billion by the end of the year. To put that into perspective, it is more than 6 times as much as was invested into climate tech as recently as 2016, when it was just $6.6 billion. The hype seems to be here to stay and to have become mainstream. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink even stated that the next 1,000 unicorns or startups worth at least $1 billion USD will be in climate tech. So before we continue, we should probably talk about what is climate tech. In short, it's any new business model or technology that mitigates the impacts and drivers of global greenhouse gas emissions and therefore helps limit global warming to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. Climate tech covers a broad range of sectors from infrastructure to energy and from mobility to food and ag and many more. Basically anything and everything under the sun. Some of the drivers for making this the decade of climate tech are more advanced and cheaper, low carbon technologies from batteries to renewable energy and more. A more climate friendly policy and regulatory environment in Europe and in the US, with governments around the world making commitments to net zero. Also, consumer awareness and demand coupled with human capital, so talent, is moving into climate tech en masse. These factors are further accelerating the transition into a cleaner and greener future. So why to spotlight Sweden and Silicon Valley? Right now, climate tech presents an immense opportunity for all. Between 2016 and 2021, climate tech startups in the US raised the most funding, while Sweden came in 3rd place. So how can we better foster and scale climate tech companies at the pace needed for net zero transition by mid-century? And what learnings can we share from Sweden and Silicon Valley as 2 leading regions in climate tech from 2 different continents? Now, I would like to introduce our panelists for today, starting with Joel Larsson, who is a general partner at Paleblue.vc based in Sweden. Paleblue is an early stage climate tech VC investing up to 2 million in pre-seed and seed stage companies based in Europe and the US. And before founding Pale Blue Dot, together with his partners, Hampus Jakobsson and Heidi Lindvall, he founded an accelerator and raised a micro fund to support the startups. Next up, we have another Swede, Anders Forslund, who is the founder and CEO of Heart Aerospace. And Heart is building an electric regional airliner certified for passenger flight as soon as 2026. Heart's ambitious mission is to create the fastest, most affordable and sustainable mode of transportation for regional travel. He is an engineer with a number of degrees in physics, space engineering, and astronautics, too many for me to mention here and to get them right, with a long academic background. And next, I would like to introduce Pooja Jain, who is innovation lead and climate sustainability and resiliency lead for maritime sector at WSP US. She has a leading role in WSP's emerging growth partnership program, which provides the opportunity for innovative early and growth stage companies to engage in a strategic partnership with WSP. Our fourth panelist is Jake Elder, who is the Senior Vice President of Global Operations at Climate View, which is a Swedish climate tech company working with cities around the world to execute their optimal pathway to net zero faster. Jake has deep expertise in global public policy development and implementation, having advised over 50 public sector clients in Europe, North America, and Latin America. Most recently, he worked with mayors and senior city officials on public policy and urban sustainability at Bloomberg Associates. I've done a lot of talking here, but now comes the fun part, which is the panel discussion. And I'd like to kick that off with a question. Why is climate tech such an exciting investment area today? And what do you do to drive the development in this space? And this one I would like to ask our investors, so Joel and Pooja, if you could please take a stab. Thank you.
Super. Yes, I think climate tech is a super important area, and if we are about to reduce our emission with 50% in 10 years, we have to do everything we can in every sector of the world. And venture is a small part, but I think changing behaviors, creating new innovations has been possible with venture money before, and that is something we can use it for today as well. And by showing that this sector can build super profitable companies with high ambition, like Climate View and Heart, for example, we will be able to move more money into this sector as well, and hopefully create more innovations. So I think it's one of the most exciting sectors in the tech scene right now. And you see that by the numbers you mentioned at the beginning, so much money is coming in. And I think we'll see more money coming every year from now on, basically. So it's super exciting.
Yeah, like Christy, you mentioned, I come from the maritime sector, which is, wherever land meets water. And we know that's where a lot of our vulnerable communities sit along the water in any part of the world. There is an increasing and more than ever need for more data-driven approach to well-informed decision-making by our governments, by our regulatory authorities, and the need for solutions and products that can make a positive impact very quickly. And more than ever, there is a need for not just the traditional players, the big organizations that played in this environment, but a need for a startup ecosystem that can grow and flourish and complement what is already happening in some of the few pockets of large organizations. So this is what is truly exciting for me, is that there is a need, and then there is an opportunity over here for the startup ecosystem to contribute towards what is a truly existential crisis right now.
Great, thank you. And to pass it over to our startup representatives here, so Heart Aerospace and Climate View, you were both founded in the 2017-2018 timeframe, which was like still part of the sort of early years of this, what we now call the second wave of climate tech, or and With the hype growing around climate tech, has that impacted your journey? Like, how are things different today versus when you started?
Yeah, should I go first? Yeah. So I think when we started, actually, when we got, for instance, we were first a Vinnova program in 2018, and we still are in a way because we still get funding from there. But then we got to Y Combinator at the winter of 2019, so early 2019, and they had they were focusing a bit on climate tech, but we were also very sure not to pitch everything we're doing in climate as just a climate question. We had to sort of show that our ideas were profitable, that there was a business model that was sort of non-dependent on the green credentials. And I don't know if that has changed. I don't know even if that's a bad thing, but I knew that it sort of made us perform even better. And we've never really, I think we haven't used the climate angle too much in our pitching. Firstly, because I think people understand that electric planes are a good climate proposition, but also because we really want to show that if we want to make a sustainable business, we need to actually have a sustainable business as well. But I think it actually worked out well for us, and I think that the investor community that we found were also sort of early adopters in a way. And those investors have now grown, and they've grown larger funds, and they've established their network very well. So I'm very happy that we came out when we did. And obviously we've seen interest just grow. We raised an A round this year or last year, obviously, and yeah, it's been exciting to see it.
Yeah, I think I probably have a similar take as you, Anders. At the end of the day, it's really important that we can show value and how we're delivering value beyond just climate, even for a company with climate in its name and that's helping cities with climate action, right? How are we helping articulate the value of climate action in a way that actually shows that we're just building a better life for people at the end of the day, whether it's more reliable air travel or buildings that don't have indoor air pollution because we've got fossil gas in our stoves. So we also try to stay stuck on that kind of theme around yes, we're a climate tech company, but we're delivering outcomes that build a better planet independent of the long-term climate ramifications. I do think there's a couple things that have impacted our journey with this surge. So first, there's just tremendous interest in partnerships. I mean, our partnerships lead gets inbounds daily. Microsoft has been a big champion of ours, and is always coming to us to say, where else can we work with you guys? And at the same time, lots of smart people are looking to get into this space, right? So there's a lot of talent out there. Now, obviously, the flip side of that is that there's a lot of companies out there looking to hire, and so I don't know where that equation kind of balances out in terms of whether there's a surplus of talent looking to move into the ecosystem or whether there's more demand. But that's certainly been, I think, a challenge and an opportunity. And then the last thing I'll add is that certainly the early stage, the investors who have been playing in this ecosystem for a while, I think, understand the context and the problems we're trying to solve. But there's certainly, I think, some bias in terms of what can move quickly and what can't, and what are really structurally their scientific problems or bureaucratic problems that truly do take time to break down, and where can we really move fast. And so trying to educate all of the folks we work with on what that real context is and what can move quickly and what can't is definitely a challenge.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think we have recently seen a lot of what would be considered like generalist funds really coming into this space and starting to invest with maybe less background and kind of experience in this area. And maybe just to touch upon what also Anders and you, Jake, both mentioned, is that you really need to build a business that stands on its own 2 feet and is not sort of relying on the climate angle of things. And I think maybe Joel, you can also comment on this, and Pooja, like, let's just make it clear for everybody, like, climate tech VCs, for instance, aren't investing in climate tech companies just because they are like greener and cleaner and kind of look better. This is a real business opportunity, right? Can you maybe speak to that point a little bit from your perspective?
Yes, yes, for sure. On our side, we think of climate tech as something that will affect every sector in the world, every business, every process, everything will be affected by climate change in the same way as software affected the world and AI affected the world. And that means when everything is affected, it means it is a huge business opportunity, and you're doing it to create profitable companies that will change the world. And you have profit and you have impact at the same time. And yes, so it is not to be. We in one way have a problem with the impact investing scene, because for me, basically, the full financial system is investing money, and all of that has an impact. It's either positive or negative. It's on one side, and today we have so much money going into investments that are maybe not having the best impact on our world. And I think we just need to move more money into the companies like Climate Your Heart that has a positive impact in the world.
Great points. And maybe just quickly on competition, because it was brought up already. So there used to be a lot of competition for the limited funding that was available. Now it seems to almost be the opposite, where investors are fighting to get into these deals. And then talent was also brought up already. Like a lot of companies seem to have some challenges in sort of like attracting and not necessarily even attracting, but just simply finding talent, because we're often talking about nascent industries or markets. Is there something you'd like to kind of bring up regarding competition and that how it looks like today?
I can, if you want, Christy, speak from a larger company perspective. We are on an everyday basis losing our talent to climate tech startups. So it's a real challenge. And outside of the challenge of just climate tech companies being able to acquire talent, we have to do more and more to retain talent just within large organization, because I think for a lot of individuals who care about being in climate tech because it serves a mission, they see that happening a lot faster with being in smaller organization with a very well-defined mission. So we see this on a day-to-day basis. Just keeping talent in-house and not losing it to startups is a big challenge for us.
Thank you,
I don't
Pooja.
have an answer. I don't have an answer how to solve that, honestly.
Just that wheels are in motion. There's a lot happening. Would anyone else like to comment on the competition piece before we move on?
I guess from a VC perspective and the investments we see, I would say the last 2 years has been the most crazy I've ever seen within venture. And if you combine the venture side and also add climate to that, it is right now crazy. So yes, competition is super high from our side, and it's. But to come back to your initial question about how this differs, like we are competing with the generalist major brand name tier 1 funds. That is the competition usually. So it is everybody moving into climate, and I'm guessing my guess is for the startups is that we discuss a bit talent, and what we see is basically it's a huge flow of smart people moving into climate, and basically people pinging us every day. There's an email or somebody who wants to get into climate tech in some way. So I would, being on the startup side of climate tech, I think you're in a good time.
Wonderful. Yes, we need all hands on deck and more people working on these important topics. So so we're here because Sweden and Silicon Valley have both had a really sort of strong lead in this area. So what do you think, why do you think both Sweden and Silicon Valley rank so high or are particularly strong at climate tech? There are obviously a lot of differences, from geographically, culturally, from regulatory perspective. What do you think are some of the drivers for both region and some of the differences? And maybe we could start with Pooja. Would you like to start?
Sure, thank you. One of the key tailwinds I see is regulatory environment. It has really shifted to favor growth of climate tech related startups in the last couple of years, and also the availability of non-dilutive grant funding. When venture was not big, there was still non-dilutive funding available, which kickstarted some of the companies that are now looking at Series A, Series B. So I would say in kind of my assessment, those are the two things that are really pushing the climate tech to grow.
Joel, Pale Blue Dot invests both in the US and in Europe. What are some of the differences you see in the startups that you maybe review and consider for investment?
That's a good question. Thinking about the differences, I think, yeah, in the Nordics and in Sweden, I think that I would agree with regulations has been part, but also like consumer behavior and corporate behavior in the Nordics has shifted quite quickly in terms of moving into climate. So I think that could have been a driver in the Nordics. What I miss in Sweden or in the Nordics that I see in the US, which is really strong, is these high, like basically building an electric airplane, these type of startups. I would say there is a lot more of them in the US than in the Nordics. Like high risk, high impact, high ambition. I would love to see a bit more of that in the Nordics in general. So that is something.
But isn't it wonderful to have Anders here?
Yes, I'm super glad we have Anders and ClimateView as well. But I would love to see more of these high ambition, hard companies in Nordics and in Sweden as well.
So we've talked about the policy and regulatory landscape a little bit. I would like to dig a little bit deeper into that. Maybe from the startup point of view, how does that play into the sort of when you are thinking about, for instance, where to start your business, where to run pilots, like where to expand, like what to consider? Is that a big consideration for you, or how do you see that? Is it working in your favor or against?
No, I mean, we're obviously, we started as one of these Vinnova projects to combat the Paris Agreement. Before a round, we had 2/3 of our funding coming from different grants from governments. We're always been super excited about public-private partnerships, and we continue to do so. I would say, as for like regulatory, that's more of a like funding, but as for regulatory, I think that we're still not at a place. I think that, and I don't want to redact what I just said, but I think that actually there is still an unpriced externality in the price of carbon, for instance, that I think should be addressed, and that should be part of a business model. And it's generally not, and we don't have the luxury today to do so because it's not clear. I don't want to, present my idea to or my business model or my business to an investor and have it contingent on things that are unclear, on rules that have not been written. I think that's, and maybe, if we had a price of carbon, for instance, if we had all of those things, if we felt confidence that these are not just guidelines, but that they're actually being, that they won't be walked back, which I think is something that we all fear, then we can crunch the numbers in a different way. But so I think that we're all seeing a tremendous upside. Like, this gotta happen. Somebody's got to come and put the foot on the scale for us. But it's not like, I don't think we're at the place where we can be holding our breath for it.
Yeah, I might maybe just add from our view of the world, for the most part, we're working with cities and trying to accelerate the infrastructure transition in cities and financing of that transition. So obviously that very closely ties to regulatory and national government policy. So our business at the moment is really focused on Western Europe and North America, where there's a bit more acknowledgement of the scale of the challenges and resources to deploy against that. But obviously, even within the call it 9 markets that we're in, right, there's very different regulatory frameworks, especially as we start thinking about the green finance ecosystem and green bonds for infrastructure investments. The EU is moving well ahead with their taxonomy to structure green bonds. US much further behind. So as we think about financing schemes in particular for cities and for infrastructure projects, that's regulatory scheme is going to be a big part of where we're able to play and how we're able to structure a platform that really helps cities and investors make the right decisions. On that piece, very much so. On some of the other pieces, maybe Anders, to your point, it kind of just depends on a number of other factors, and the regulatory piece is a necessary but not sufficient criteria.
Great points, and I think we will come back to this in just a little bit, but I think this is also related to how we really scale and like get these technologies adopted at scale, which then brings impact with that. So we'll follow up at that in just a second. But since we have actually just now touched upon like some challenges, so being it regulatory or policy or for instance financing related, I would like to just discuss a little bit more about that in depth. Like, what are the main challenges for climate tech companies today? Like, a lot has changed, obviously, for the better, but still, like a small percentage of funding is going to climate tech companies overall, and there are many other hurdles that still need to be overcome, or at least, you know, if even if everything else was great, like we're working on a tight timeline here. Can you maybe speak to some of the challenges that climate tech companies in particular are facing today, and are they any different from what traditional startups are facing, or are they unique to climate tech? And obviously, if you have solutions or suggestions, like we're always eager to hear about those.
Maybe just one quick thought from me in that, you know, besides saying I'm not sure the challenges are any different than any other startup in terms of growth and recruitment, that those are probably the biggest things, and you know, we all need to tackle those. The one nuance that I might add, and Joel and Anders both hit on this a bit earlier, is trying to drive a different conversation and break away from the kind of NGO international collaboration view of this stuff, where we should, you know, be driving climate action because it's good, and really thinking about, you know, not just, we know that what's good for the planet can be good for business, but how do we have this kind of whole focus and intent on bringing something to market because it's good for a customer, and not just because it's good for the planet, and trying to, you know, find the right balance there and bring folks in that may have a background in the NGO community or in the kind of international diplomacy community, where their approaches to driving change are very different than what a technology, you know, company might try to do. You know, blending those worldviews and really staying focused on building something that's good for customers because it's good for them, not just because it's good for the planet.
Yeah, and I can maybe build upon what Jake just mentioned. Climate tech offerings are not necessarily consumer products. These are offerings that interact with people, with cities, with governments. And I think one of the challenges that climate tech companies can face is that when a product is presented, and sometimes a lack of acknowledgement of that there are people involved in the government or in the community that need to be equal advocates of that product. And the processes, we know that our governments and our cities come with very traditional entrenched processes, and how do these products align with or disrupt those processes has to be very clearly communicated for them to be embraced. So this is one of the challenges that we have seen, at least with partnering with climate tech, is kind of coaching on acknowledgement of the government, people, and processes for a product to be successful in those communities.
I agree with what both of you said and what Jake said, and I agree that I think the challenges are equally hard if you're building a climate tech startup or you're building something else, and it is incredibly hard to build a startup. It is incredibly hard, and very few will succeed and have a large impact. So I think one of the high-level challenges is just to get more people trying, have building ambitious, hard companies. I think we just need more people building and more people investing in them as well. And also I think historically, one challenging thing with venture has been is very focused on a few geographies. And I think climate tech is affecting the full world, and we need solutions from all around the world, from all backgrounds as well. And historically, if you look at the gender diversity in venture, it's been really, really bad. And I think we need to solve a few of these challenges as well at the same time to solve climate change, to make sure that everyone in the world can be part of building and helping out building and fixing solutions for climate change.
And I would just add that I think there's, you know, I'm always a little bit, you know, there's common denominator between all climate tech companies, but obviously every technology needs its expert in that technology. I think that, you know, if we're building an airplane, we don't need people that are climate tech expert. We need some of them that have, you know, helped us, you know, that can contribute to fundraising or governance or those things. But more important than that, we need people that know how to build an airplane. And I think if you're working and building a fusion reactor, then you need the people that know how to build a fusion reactor. So that is very different. And I think that and actually for our industry, it is not the natural state of knowledge in any technology is to decay, and it's sort of my worries are more about how do I get people interested not in climate tech, because I believe that the youth will be really interested in climate tech, and I believe that people want to work in climate tech, but is to find those domain knowledges that might not be, as I'm always a little bit wary of people that speak to me too much about their climate passion when I'm hiring, for instance, because to me that is a little bit, that's a little bit of a romanticism that we have. I'm going to come work at a company, I'm going to change the world, I'm going to do all this, and that's great. But if you're not passionate about stress calculations for airframes or something like that is like completely most people might not find interesting, then you're not going to stick around when you realize that that's what the job is about, right? So I think we should be just a little bit cautious, but by sort of just pushing people into climate tech, and also sort of just use that as a framework for looking at these different domains, because I think that we are bundled together companies that are doing radically different things.
Great points, and I love how these examples and comments that have been shared just recently just show how complex the whole climate tech space is. Like, it is so broad, so diverse in terms of the technologies, but not necessarily, for instance, who is part of it today. Whereas like it is a global problem and issue, like Joel mentioned, but we also need to look for global solutions to serve everyone, because as we all know, like it's also the underrepresented communities, for instance, that are hit the hardest by the effects of climate change. So and these comments have also are like a great bridge to our next topic, which is for true impact, like we really need to have both speed and scale. So for the last 5 years, we've seen this great surge of like climate tech startups emerge. And now, a lot of these companies are raising their Series A's and B's and some even beyond. So things are changing. We're kind of entering a new era. And also we have this great number of early stage companies that we now need to get to the next level. So what is really needed to accelerate the speed of transition into net zero?
No, I think that it's, the funding is not the limiting factor. I think that there's, if the problem was, like we hear about these Green Deal packages, like the European Green Deal, 1.1 trillion. And I think the big challenge for them is going to be finding the right companies to put money in, and the right, just the right ideas, and also the right execution. So I think that and I don't want to say talent, but because I think talent is overrated. It's more about finding people that have the determination and the building skill sets among people, and people that are willing to take on how to learn, go very deep into the woods. I think we need domain matter expert, and I think I've said that in my last comment already, so I won't be too repetitive.
The only thing, Anders, I would just add is actually another point you made earlier, which is that probably the quickest way to make the unit economics better for most climate tech companies is to get carbon prices in place, right? Yeah. I'm sure you've got the spreadsheet that shows how your business model looks, with a $50 a ton price on carbon and how it looks without that. And I'm sure it speeds years off your development timeline. So yeah. I won't take up more airtime on this one than just to say, the fastest way to do it is to help the economics.
I have exactly that slide.
I'm going to repeat I'm going to repeat what I've said a few times. I think we still need more people and more money into climate tech. It's still such a small part of all the innovations we do, and there is so much innovation that has a negative impact on the world right now. And we need to increase the side which has a positive impact, and decrease the side that is creating a negative impact. So more people and more money into climate tech would be my point.
We have kind of talked about how this is like a systems issue and how, we need domain expertise. So it's not that we're only talking to and talking about people in climate tech. So kind of as companies reach the later stages and maybe reached out to more of these generalist funds, I think we need more of that. We need more of education. We need to kind of find a common language and a common set of goals to really take this to the whole new level. I think, since we have both Climate View and Heart here, and we're talking about scalability, what are your plans for expansion? What's in store for Climate View and for Heart, say 3 to 5 years from now?
Jake, you want to start?
Question. Yeah, sure. So I'll give you maybe two answers. Maybe the really ambitious one that probably is going to get some eyes rolling, and maybe more 20-year vision, and then a 3 to 5 year version. The 20-year big idea for us is to be a carbon central bank and to have all this intelligence about data, kind of how the world works, how governments are tracking against climate change, what the impacts of different investments are, and to be the kind of intelligence platform that drives that. Now, if you ask me any follow-up on what that looks like, I'll just hang up because I don't know, right? But that's kind of the North Star down the road. So if we're thinking more 3 to 5 years, we really want to be the platform by which communities around the world are integrating climate action and their overall kind of city operations or public policy, and bridging that kind of divide between, climate action being the things you do to save the planet and distinct from the things you do to run a city or run a state or run a country, right? How do we make those two one? Tactically, that means, thinking about how do we get, 10, 20% of the world's emissions kind of being modeled and tracked on our platform? And then how do we go upstream in the value chain beyond just tracking into getting into the financing market? So in terms of support, mostly if you think about those outcomes, we need to be global, and we need to be in all markets, not just in the markets in North America and Europe. And we need help expanding into those markets. So we've already started some of those conversations. One of our lead investors from our Series A is a VC called Nordic Ninja, which is a bunch of Japanese investors that are supporting a bunch of Nordic startups. So we've had some really good help from Tomu Sahara there, helping us think about how to enter the Japanese market in particular. But Japan's just one, and every market is different, and especially when you're selling to governments, the regulatory structures, the levels of authority cities have, et cetera, really vary by market. So we'll need a lot of help understanding each individual market and thinking about market entry.
Well, that is very exciting. I did take some notes, but we'll get back to the 20-year vision later. Anders, what about for Heart?
Now, in 2026, we'll be in commercial service, and already in 2024, we'll have our first aircraft in the air flying, the first flight test aircraft. By the time we get to enter into commercial service, there's a bunch of things. We'll be a few hundred, maybe 500 employees. We would have raised about 500 million from different stakeholders. We will have built up final assembly halls, flight test centers, distribution centers, support centers. We will have engaged in partnerships with airlines and suppliers all over the world. I am, it's exciting times ahead, and it's kind of surreal, I think. And I can also say, if you want our sort of 2050 vision is to create that all short haul travel should be done on batteries. So that is like 1/3 of the emissions of aviation. So we're not planning to build a plane that can fly between San Francisco and Sweden. But for all those short hops that represent the vast majority of departures, we want them to be on electric planes.
That is super inspiring to hear. Both of these companies makes me like super inspiring.
We get chills, right? Yeah, no, this is what makes this so exciting.
On a personal level, I stopped flying 7 years back, and I've taken three flights in 7 years. And I'm waiting for you to continue and make it easy for me to travel. So that is awesome.
Great, yeah.
This is an exciting topic, and I would love to stay on it for a few more minutes, but we are almost at time. So I want to just ask a quick question. We did kind of mention that, okay, we still, I think it was Joel who mentioned that we still need more funding, but where specifically do you all see funding, like gaps in climate funding today? So what needs to change? Is it research? Is it early stage? Is it later stage? Is it non-dilutive? Like, you name it.
I can repeat what I said before, Jan, here, in terms of, I think we need, one gap is making sure we are solving the issues with the concentration of capital to small groups of geographies and backgrounds of people. I think that is huge gap within VC and within climate tech VC as well. And in terms of areas, I think financing in general that are like financing solution for climate tech that are non-VC, like helping with the project finance, all the like moving low risk money into climate, I think has huge impact, and we're not really good at doing it today. So that is one area. And I think one more area that is, I think carbon has we're talking about the carbon tax or a carbon price, but I think one thing that is under service biodiversity, like, because there's so many things that are related to carbon. Carbon is the end game, but there's so many things that will drive carbon. I think biodiversity is one area where we haven't really been able to it's hard to raise money, it's hard to describe. We need, that's underserved in the climate scene in some way, I would say.
I also say that we are seeing movement where there's more corporate VC funds that are moving into climate tech investments, and more of that would help bridge if there is a gap in funding. There needs to be more of that. We're seeing momentum in that direction, and that's a positive trend.
Maybe just two other quick thoughts here. The first would be, both when I think about how to help, government entities and communities raise capital, as well as how to help, companies like ours raise capital. The metrics are kind of blended at the moment, right? With financial results and then social impact, but there's no clear frameworks or, playbooks for how to assess investments, whether they're investments in companies or in infrastructure, right? And so everybody's kind of making it up. My observation, at least, everybody's making it up as they go. And so in the short term, we need to be comfortable making it up as we go. And in the long term, we need some better kind of methods for figuring out how we talk about financial results, and then how you do or don't incorporate, climate impacts or other social benefits into your investment decisions, and how those pieces work. Joel, your comment about biodiversity is really interesting to me. And if we had more time, I could go on for a while on that one. But if I think about sectoral gaps, certainly I think the sequestration piece of the puzzle is lagging really far behind. And the slower we are to act, the bigger a piece of the solution that becomes. And that's one where the economics are not going to make sense until there's some sort of price or some way for those innovators to extract value from customers, not just because those of us who want to buy some offsets are willing to buy some offsets. So that piece, I'd love to see a lot more money and a lot more thinking go into both natural and non-natural solutions.
Excellent points. And believe it or not, it's time for our final question. And now it's time for predictions. So what are some of the trends or highlights for 2022 that you see? And if I could just ask for quick, maybe 1 or 2 sentences here, that'd be great from all of you.
I will follow up on Jake here. And I think that what you're looking for, I think, is going to be the next year. You'll see a lot of money moving into sequestration, more than you expected from mainstream VCs. I think seeing these curves, I think you'll see a lot more investments in projects that can capture carbon and sequester carbon in different ways. So I think that's going to be a mainstream investment area. Even if it used to be on the clean tech side, it's going to be more venture money going into that space for sure. So that is one of the predictions.
Okay, Jake, what about you?
Yeah, so besides the conversations we've already had around climate tech being the kind of emerging go-to from a talent perspective, I think it'll be interesting to see how more of these generalist VCs start moving into the space, and whether they set quotas on their overall investment portfolio for green investments, and how those frameworks get set up. Most interesting to me is going to be what actually counts as green. And as we've seen in some of the conversations that have happened, internationally about ESG investments more broadly, how do we make sure that those investments are being vetted, and that you don't have investors making investments in the next coal technology or cleaner coal technology and then checking the box as a climate smart investment.
Yes, still a lot of greenwashing, hopefully less in the future. Pooja.
One of the things that we are hearing a lot of conversations around is equity and diversity and equity, and how that plays into along with climate is going to be an interesting trend to watch in 2022. It's certainly front and center for most jurisdictions, and especially in the transportation world. I'm curious to see how that plays into the climate tech world in 2022.
Great. And final words from Anders. Prediction.
I think the panel has been saying I think they have a much better view on overall view on what's happening in the ecosystem. I can only say I'll end up with a sort of shameless plug and say we have super interesting things happening in our hangar. We will have events where we'll be showing this to the world, and I'm giddy about the things that we're going to be doing in our company in 2022.
Just like a founder should be. Okay, this has been such an exciting panel. I know we're at time and even a couple of minutes over, but I did pick a couple of themes that were mentioned a few times. So there's definitely diversity, equity, inclusion. We hope to have more people involved from different parts of the world, and to see more solutions that serve different communities around the world and not just in some cleantech hubs. We also have acknowledged that this is such a massive, often a systems issue involving people from sort of within climate tech, but also outside of it. And we have to think of ways to really have those conversations and increase the dialogue between the different groups, to make sure there's equally domain expertise as well as climate tech experts available, and then obviously people in for example, governments and who are shaping our regulation and legislation, who understand really where the world is going and what is needed. One of the big things being obviously price on carbon that would really help drive this change forward faster. So I think that is definitely something I'm sure all would hope to see in the very near future. So, well, this is the end of the panel, and actually the end of the Sweden Innovation Days. I believe we were the last program of the few days. For Nordic climate tech startups, if you're looking to expand to US, please reach out to Nordic Innovation House. There are a lot of great resources. There's a lot of connections to be made. And then also for Swedish startups, Vinnova does offer funding opportunities. Andres can vouch for them as well. And then this is a recorded session, and then this, among other sessions from the few days, will be posted and shared on swedeninsiliconvalley.se. So please go check that out and follow us on LinkedIn and other channels. We hope to stay in touch, and obviously we hope to see great things happen in climate tech for all of our sake. So thank you so much for listening, and have a great day. Good night, depending on where you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsty. Thanks, everybody.